We're going to dig into Exodus chapter 18. The most important thing you will ever do in your life is this: to know Jesus and to know the gospel more fully. I think the most important thing you will do throughout your life as a follower of Christ is to know Jesus more and to understand the message of the gospel more fully. And Exodus plays such an important role in the scriptures because it helps us see Jesus more. It helps us see the gospel more clearly as we go through all of these stories. It's all pointing to Christ. And so the Israelites are now in this season where they've come out of Egypt. They were enslaved for 400 years. And that is a picture. Moses comes in as the rescuer to bring them out of slavery. That's a picture of our salvation. All right, this isn't just telling us what happened back then. This is giving us a glimpse into our own freedom story. All right, so Moses comes in as the rescuer, frees God's people from slavery in Egypt. That represents our salvation. But between the time they leave Egypt and enter into the promised land is 40 years. And we're entering into the time of Exodus where they're going to be wandering around in the desert for a while. All right, this story, Exodus 18, they're actually going to be at the same place at Mount Sinai from Exodus 18 all the way until Numbers chapter 10. So this whole chunk of the Bible, they're in the same exact spot. And God has brought them into the desert before bringing them into the promised land. And this part of the story is a picture for us, like our time here on earth. So many of you in this room who you would call yourself a Christian, you've already been saved. Your freedom moment has already happened. You've already been saved and set free from slavery to sin. But you didn't just teleport right to heaven when that happened, right? You didn't pray a prayer or say, God, I give you my life and choose to follow him. And Jesus just grabbed you and brought you up to heaven with him. It didn't happen like that. The promised land is coming. One day, we're going to be in the promised land in heaven with God. But we have all this time in between where we are walking in what feels like a desert. Life feels crazy and difficult sometimes. And there's pain and there's suffering involved in life. And there's disappointment involved in life. A lot of the things that the Israelites experience as they're going through the desert. So you see how all of this is a picture pointing to what's to come. And so today, I like Exodus 18 because it's very practical. Like God gives us guidance as we go through these desert moments in life. So this time that you're here on this earth before you get to the promised land, before we're called back to heaven with God, God guides us. He gives us different things to help us along the way. And so what I like about today's chapter is it gives us a lot of practical tools. Exodus isn't filled with a whole lot of that because it's a lot of narrative, but I think today gives us some really practical stuff. And hopefully we'll see Jesus in the midst of this too. So we're going to start reading in verse 1. Before we do that, let's just pray and ask the Lord to be here. God, thank you for every student that's in this room. I thank you for your word. I just pray that it would speak to us, God. I pray that you would shape us into the people you've called us to be. And even in the midst of difficult desert walks that we go on too, we know that the promised land is coming. So thank you that you've prepared a place for us in heaven and you're preparing a place for us now. But in the meantime, while we're here on this earth, we want to do everything we can to follow you closer, to be more committed in our relationship with you and our faith, to be more surrendered. And so I pray today is just one step in that process, that you would sanctify us by your word. John 17:17 says, sanctify me by your word, by your truth. Your word is truth. And so this is what we need. We need the truth of your word to sanctify us and make us the people you've called us to be. We don't know how to follow you without the help of your spirit. So please help us now, Lord, in your name. Amen. All right, Exodus chapter 18, starting in verse 1. Here we go. It says this. We're going to read all the way through to verse 12. Now Jethro, the priest of Midian and father-in-law of Moses, heard everything God had done for Moses and for his people Israel, and how the Lord brought Israel out of Egypt. So he heard all the crazy things that had been going down. Verse 2, after Moses had sent away his wife Zipporah, his father-in-law Jethro received her and her 2 sons. One of them was named Gershom, for Moses said, I have become a foreigner in a foreign land. So we knew about this son already, but he had another son, and his name was Eleazar, for he said, my father's God was my helper, and he saved me from the sword of Pharaoh. Verse 5, now Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, together with Moses' sons and wife, came to him in the wilderness where he was camped near the mountain of God. So they met him there in the wilderness. Now, this is the first time Moses has seen his wife and his sons in a really, really long time. Verse 6, Jethro had sent word to him saying, I, your father-in-law Jethro, am coming to you with your wife and your 2 sons. So Moses went out to meet his father-in-law and bowed down and kissed him. That was just a normal greeting, all right? That wasn't anything weird. They greeted each other. and they went into the tent. Verse 8, Moses told his father-in-law about everything the Lord had done to Pharaoh and the Egyptians for Israel's sake, and about all the hardships they had met along the way. So he tells them the good stuff and the bad, and how the Lord had saved them. And Jethro was delighted to hear all about the good things the Lord had done for Israel in rescuing them from the hand of the Egyptians. And he said, "Praise be to the Lord, who rescued you from the hand of the Egyptians and of Pharaoh, and who rescued the people from the hand of the Egyptians. Now I know." He's a priest of Midian, so he's a religious man. He knew this already, but he's just reiterating again. "Now I know that the Lord is greater than all the other gods, for he did this to those who had treated Israel arrogantly." And closing in verse 12 for this section, "Then Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, brought a burnt offering and other sacrifices to God, and Aaron came with all the elders of Israel to eat a meal with Moses' father-in-law in the presence of God." All right, so what's happening in this section? Let's break this down a little bit. We need to know a little bit of the context to know who these people are, to know why these relationships are like this. So Jethro is Moses' father-in-law. If you remember, Moses grew up in the palace in Egypt, and then he saw one of his own, an Israelite, being beaten. And what did he do? He killed him, right? He murdered him and buried him in the sand. And he got scared that he was going to be found out, so he ran from Egypt. He took off. He went as far away as he could. And he ended up in a place called Midian. And he sat down by a well. He met a woman there, and he married her. That's Zipporah. That's his wife. So Zipporah's dad is his father-in-law, Jethro, and he had two sons, Gershom and Eleazar, his two sons. They all meet him there. Now, Jethro is an important figure in Moses' life. Think about how Moses grew up. We don't know too much about Moses' father, his birth father, but Moses grew up in the palace in Egypt. So he didn't exactly have a great example of fatherhood in Pharaoh. And Pharaoh probably taught him a lot of important things, skills and education and being a leader and all that stuff. But when Moses fled to Midian, he was there for 40 years. His job, if you remember, was keeping Jethro's sheep. He was a shepherd. That was his role. He was supposed to watch after the sheep of his father-in-law. So his father-in-law likely taught him everything that he knew. I mean, he had a great education in the palace in Egypt, but practically everything he knew about leadership, about loving people, about taking care of sheep, he learned from Jethro. Jethro was kind of that father figure for Moses when he didn't have that growing up. And just real briefly, I know some of you in this room, by the way, Mother's Day is tomorrow. Make sure you do something nice for your mom. Give her a hug. Say Happy Mother's Day. Tell her you love her. Do the dishes without being asked. Something to serve your mother. But for those of you in this room that you're like, I never had a great example of a dad growing up. I never had a father figure invest in me. Or maybe I have a dad and he's present, but he's not really active in my life. He doesn't ask me about how I'm doing. He doesn't really get involved in what's happening in my day-to-day life. I just want to tell you, God can provide in those areas that maybe your father has lacked in. He can provide somebody to invest in your life, a mentor to pour into you, and maybe in a way that you've craved from your own birth father. Like, God provided Jethro to Moses in a time that he needed it. And even now, Jethro comes back. And as soon as he gets there, Moses and Jethro have a special relationship. He's like, "You're my mentor, you're my father-in-law, you're the person in my life who's invested in me the most, who's cared about me the most." And immediately what Moses does is he starts pouring out all of the things that have happened. He just goes on and on. And I picture these hours in this tent just talking about the things God did. Like, "Bro, you won't believe it. The seas just opened up." And Jethro was like, "No." And he's like, "Yeah." He's going through all the stories. There was a pillar of fire in the night that guided us. And then there was smoke in the day. He's like, "There was smoke in the day. There was smoke in the day." Like, picture Moses and Jethro having this real candid conversation. All the stuff that God has done up to this point to free them from the Israelites. Now, we don't know exactly when this happened, but Moses actually, the Bible says he sent his wife and his sons away. Most people believe this was likely when the plague started happening in Egypt. So Moses went to Pharaoh and said, "Let my people go." And then stuff started to go down. He's like, "Y'all got to get up out of here. Go back to Midian." So he hasn't seen them in a really, really long time. And he finally sees his wife and his kids, but he starts pouring out his heart specifically to Jethro. Why? Because Jethro was an important person in his life. He was a mentor who had poured into him. I think this is one of the practical things that we can take from this. It's not the main point of the passage, but all of us need somebody, a mentor, who we can pour our heart out to. So the question I have for you is, who in your life is a mentor that you can share anything with? Somebody who's a little older than you, a few steps ahead of you in life, who's lived a little bit longer than you. Not every old person is dumb. Like, listen, they've lived life a little bit. They know some stuff. Right? They're wise. Like they've experienced this, especially if they've been following Jesus for a long time. Like pick a mentor who's been following Jesus for a really, really long time and just listen to them. But this person also listens to you. Think about this. Jethro is the mentor in this situation, but he invites Moses, tell me everything. Tell me everything. I have someone in my life that I love getting to sit down and have coffee with because this is what they do. They invite me in and they just say, hey, take a seat. Tell me what's going on. As simple as that. Tell me what's going on. And then I'll just pour my heart out. I'll be like, you won't believe all the things that are happening in my family, and my kids are driving me nuts, and ministry is crazy. And I just get to like pour out my heart. But look, this is what God did. I mean, my son had surgery, and now he's doing amazing. I just want to celebrate all the stuff that God did. And I have someone that I can talk to about that stuff. And yes, we can always bring those things to the Lord, but there's something important in Moses' life about having a mentor, that father figure who he can go to. So who is that for you? If you don't have one, it doesn't just happen. Like sometimes someone will come up to you and say, hey, I want to mentor you. I want to invest in you. But oftentimes you go to them and you say, hey, would you be my mentor? Could we just get together once every couple weeks, once every month, even just once every other month, a couple times a year? And can I just share what's going on in my life? You can give me wisdom. You can invest in me. We all need to initiate those relationships. And it's not just going to happen. If you don't have that person, I can tell you right now, like your small group leader would be ecstatic. If you ask them that, they'd be like, oh, that would be amazing. I would love to be your mentor. Like, there's so many people that God has placed here at this church to step into that role in your life. And I think we would be very foolish not to take advantage of that. I know that I went years without it, and I'm so glad that I have those people in my life now. So find someone who can just sit and talk to you, because gaining that wisdom is so, so valuable. So let's keep reading in verse 13. Again, remember, that's not the main point of the passage. That's just one point. Look at verse 13. This is where things start to take a little bit of a turn. It says, the next day, Moses took his seat to serve as judge for the people. And look at what happens. They stood around him from morning till evening. And when his father-in-law saw all that Moses was doing for the people, he said, what is this you're doing for the people? Why do you alone sit as judge while all these people stand around you from morning till evening? He's like, I'm just asking a question. Like, why is this happening like this? And this seems to be Moses' rhythm. This wasn't just a random thing. Moses had done this like every single day. And Moses answered him, because the people come to me and they seek God's will. Whenever they have a dispute, it's brought to me, and I decide between the parties and inform them of God's decrees and instructions. And Moses' father-in-law replied, what you are doing is not good. Seems like, oh, that would be a good thing. Like he's a judge. He's mediating for the people between them and God. That seems like a good thing. But he says, what you're doing is not good. You and these people who come to you will only what? Wear yourselves out. The work is too heavy for you. You cannot handle it alone. Man, like that verse may be for someone in here right now. The work is too heavy for you. You can't handle it alone. Listen now to me, and I will give you some advice, and may God be with you. He says, I agree, you must be the people's representative before God and bring their disputes to him. Your job is to teach them his decrees and instructions and show them the way they are to live and how they are to behave. But, he says, you can't do it by yourself. Look at verse 21. But select capable men from all the people who fear God, trustworthy men who hate dishonest gain, and appoint them as officials over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens, and have them serve as judges for the people at all times. But have them bring any difficult case to you. The simple cases they can decide themselves, but that will make your load lighter because they will share it with you. And if you do this, and God so commands, you will be able to stand the strain, and all these people will go home satisfied. All right, so let's talk about what's going down in Moses' life. Sometimes the very thing that you're passionate about and you're so committed to is also the thing that becomes your downfall. We see this happen in the world all the time. Like think about athletes who pour their whole life into their sport and then they retire and they don't have anything to fall back on. And then Tom Brady's like, I want to go back. And then they just unretire. Like think about these people who, and it happens in all different kind of sports. They leave their sport. They've invested their whole life into something. They get away from it and they're like, I don't have an identity outside of this. I don't have a purpose outside of what I loved and what I was passionate about. So they just run right back to it to try to find meaning and significance again. This happens with businessmen and women who just pour their life into their company, into making money. They do everything they possibly can to just invest and make more and be more successful. And all the while, their family is falling apart. They end up getting divorced, being estranged from their children. They don't even know the people that are closest to them and care about them most. I mean, this happens even with pastors, leaders in the church, like people who work to serve God. They get so overworked and overcommitted. And in the name of serving Jesus, they pour their life into something, but they actually miss their family. Like, how many stories do you hear about pastors with a moral failure or committing adultery? And now they're separated from their wives and their family has fallen apart, all because they were doing something they thought that God had called them to do, and they were so passionate, but they poured all of their life into it, and they missed the things that were most important all along. And Jethro sees Moses going down this path. And it probably started with good intentions, right? I mean, it always does. It always starts with good intentions. Moses is like, I want to help people. And Jethro's like, what you're doing is not good. Do you see what's happening? Like, you've become the only person that the people can go to talk about stuff, to settle these disputes. And he's like, do you realize how unhealthy this is? He's like, look at your life. Look at the way you've structured your schedule. From the time the sun comes up till the sun goes down, you don't stop, dude. And Jethro's like, dude, as your mentor, as a father figure in your life, I care about you enough to tell you the truth. And that's something you got to look for in a mentor too, not just someone who's like, you're doing great, my man. Like, that's good. You need people to encourage you. But you also need someone who's going to tell it like it is, who's going to tell you the truth. They're like, look, this is messed up. The way you just talked to your friend, the way you belittled that person and made them feel alone, like, that was messed up, dude. You need someone who's going to tell you the honest truth, who's going to call you out sometimes. And he calls Moses out, and Moses' answer, the people need me. What if I don't do it? How is it going to get done? Like, the people need me to do this. That's his reason, and that's his feeling. And I think the heart behind why Moses is doing this and helping the people is genuine. But that can escalate very quickly from being an unselfish thing to a very, very selfish thing. And there's usually a progression of how this works. It usually goes like this. If I don't do this, it won't get done. Now, you can apply that to anything. You ever heard someone say, if you want something done right, do it yourself, right? So it starts there. It's like, if I want to get this done right. If I don't do it, it won't get done. But it very quickly can turn into, if I don't do this, I'm letting people down. So now it's not just me and I want to get this done for myself. It's I'm letting people down. Like, people are going to be upset with me. They're going to be upset with everything around them if I don't step in and do something. And then that turns into, if I don't do this, I'm letting God down. Now, that just became a whole different ballgame, didn't it? If I don't accomplish this task, if I don't serve these people, if I don't do all of these tasks and requirements and fill up my schedule and overwork myself and overcommit and say yes to everything, I'm not just letting myself down or other people down. Now I've turned it into, I'm letting God down, as if God can't accomplish all these tasks without me. He needs me to do all this stuff, or it's not going to get done. Like, how arrogant is that? You see how it quickly goes from selfless act of serving people to selfish and arrogant? And then this is where it gets really dangerous. You get into Tom Brady territory here. I'm not really mad at Tom Brady. Like, he may have had good reasons for coming back. I don't know. I just wanted him to retire forever. I'm a little bitter. But this is the last part that it can turn into. If I don't do this, not only will it not get done, not only am I letting people down, letting God down, if I don't do this, my life has no purpose. You can go very quickly from, if I don't do this, it won't get done, to, if I don't do this, my life has no purpose. And I think Moses is very close to that place. If I don't sit here as a judge before the people all day long, if I don't do what I feel like I'm supposed to do, then I have no purpose in my life. And Jethro calls him out. Raise your hand real quick if you know that your tendency is to be a people pleaser and overcommit to things. Be honest. All right, a lot of you. You can put your hands down. The rest of you are liars. Listen. I'm just kidding. A lot of us, not all of us, a lot of us do have a tendency to be people pleasers and try to do everything we can to make other people happy. And sometimes that leads to overworking ourselves and overcommitting to stuff. And it may not even just be things that are serving others. It may just be, listen to me, the way that you've structured your schedule and your calendar and your life, and you may not even done it intentionally, but the things that you commit to, you haven't done it without thinking at all about your relationship with God and how that's going to suffer, your relationships with your family. And it started with good intentions when you picked those 5 AP classes in one semester. Like, it started with good intentions when you're like, I'm going to play football and basketball and be in the play and learn piano all in 1 week. Like, I know it started good. You had great intentions for why you wanted to do all that stuff. But if you're honest, it's killing you. You're exhausted all the time. Like, you're completely worn down. You're more tired than you've ever been in your life. You wake up finding it impossible to have joy and actually enjoy what you're doing because you feel like you've worked yourself tirelessly all the way down to the bone. You're like, I feel like every day I'm just running on fumes. I've got nothing left. I've got no fuel. And the reason why you have no fuel, you've said yes to so many things, and now you think it's your job to continue every single one of them and maintain it. Like you're spinning plates on sticks, and it's impossible to keep all of them in the air. You cannot please everyone. Listen, you have limits to what you can actually handle. I'm surprised how many conversations I have with you guys. It's much different nowadays than it was when I was your age. Like, you guys are way busier than I was, than we were. All the adults in the room, right? Like, it's crazy how busy and committed you guys are, which is a great thing to be committed to stuff. But if you overcommit and say yes to everything, you are going to run yourself into the ground. And you're going to lose the things that matter most, what's most important, your actual relationship with God, like spending time with Jesus, spending time with your family. Like, you don't want to graduate high school and be like, I never spent meaningful time with my parents, with my siblings, with my friends. Now, I also know there's some of you in this room, like, you don't do nothing and you need to work hard. Like, you need to get off your butt and actually do something. There's some of you in this room that applies to you. But I think there's a lot more in this room than I even think that are way overcommitted to stuff. And you're exhausted right now. And I want to tell you this. That is not the life that Jesus wants for you. When you stand before God one day, I don't want to hear the words, well done, good and busy servant. I think about what Jesus says, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, right? But those who do the will of my Father. And he says, there will be some that stand before me. And what's their list? We cast out demons in your name. We prophesied in your name. All the stuff that they did. I was the captain on my team. I mean, I was valedictorian. Do you know all the accomplishments that I have on my resume, Jesus? And he says, depart from me, I never knew you. That's one of the scariest verses in the entire Bible. And if you're not careful, you can run yourself into the ground, get completely exhausted, and miss the things in life that are the most important. Jesus invites us into a life where we slow down. Like, God's been teaching me this lately. I don't think it's a coincidence that we happen to be in Exodus 18 right now. Because like, this is the season of my life where God is telling me, Javan, you have run yourself into the ground for years now, and it's time to stop and to slow down and to take a breath. I'm just being transparent. That I'm in a season of my life where God is like, Javan, slow down. Enjoy your time with me. Rest. Breathe. Enjoy your time with your family. I've seen way too many people get into their 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever it is, and they've spent their whole life ambitious as anything and just pursuing success and pursuing even great things like ministry. All for what? Because they feel like, I don't have a purpose without it. People are counting on me. God's counting on me. This is the life that Jesus invites us into. I don't normally do this, but I'm going to read a verse from the Message, All right, let me just preface this. The Message Bible is not a translation. It's a paraphrase. So it just kind of summarizes in our modern day terms what this verse is trying to communicate. But I want you to listen to this. This is Matthew 11, verses 28 through 30 from the Message. All right, this may be the only time you hear me quote the Message. So it says, are you tired? This is Jesus talking. Worn out, burned out on religion? Come to me, get away with me, and you'll recover your life. Anyone want to recover your life? I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Look at this next line. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. And Jesus says, I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. If you feel like the burden is heavy on you, you feel like it's too much for you to carry, Jesus says, that's not me. That may be yourself putting that pressure on your shoulders. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live what? Freely and lightly. I don't know about you, but that's the kind of life that I want to live. Seriously, like that is the kind of life that I want to dedicate myself to. Freely and lightly. The unforced rhythms of grace. A life of gospel rest. Knowing that Jesus is in charge. If I don't do this, God's still in control. What if the sentence ended like that? If I don't do this, it's going to be okay. If I don't get into that college I wanted to, it's going to be all right. God's still in charge. He's still orchestrating my life. If I don't get good enough grades, then I won't be able to have the future I want. Really? Listen, you don't have that much power. You think that you have all the power to control your future as if God is up there like, oh man, he didn't get good grades. Now I can't do anything with his future. Like, you don't have that power. God is in control. He's going to do what he wants to do. If I don't do this, God's still in charge. I want to close reading the end of this chapter, verse 24 of Exodus 18. This tells us what Moses did in response to what Jethro had told him. Look at this. Verse 24, Moses listened to his father-in-law and did everything he said. He chose capable men from all Israel and made them leaders of all the people, officials over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens, and they served as judges for the people at all times. The difficult cases they brought to Moses, but the simple ones they decided themselves. And then Moses sent his father-in-law on his way, and Jethro returned to his own country. Chapter ends there, and funny how that works. He listened. He did what his father-in-law asked him to do, and it worked out. If I don't do this, and God still looked after him. Now, some people read this and they say, this is what this means. We need to delegate things. And the main point of this passage is to delegate people to do stuff in your life. So like if you don't have the capacity to do the dishes, have your little sister do it. That's the way you have to set it up. That's not the main point of this passage, okay? I think that's a principle. It's a good principle to learn to like delegate stuff in leadership. And I think this is used in many circles in the church to talk about that. Like, oh, this is a passage about delegation. I think that's one of the principles from this that's good. But I don't think that's the main point. Remember, every single part of Exodus is pointing to who? Jesus. You need to learn to read the Bible this way. Please, every single story in Scripture, every book, every chapter is screaming the name Jesus. And when you learn to see it like that, you can't unsee it. And so Moses is a mediator between God and the people. He's relaying the information from God to the people to make these decisions as a judge. And he can't do it all. And I just wonder the picture that this gives us. Like Moses is writing this, and he's trying to tell us, listen, I tried to be the mediator, and I couldn't do it. But there's one coming that's going to be able to be the perfect mediator between God and man, and that's Jesus. Paul says this in 1 Timothy 2:5, for there is one God and one what? Mediator between God and mankind, the man Christ Jesus. There is one God and one mediator between God and mankind, the man Christ Jesus. As great as Moses was, he was limited. He had limits in what he could bring to the table. And he's writing this, and I just picture him thinking, I wonder if there's going to be a judge and a mediator one day who's not limited by time like I am, who's not limited by exhaustion and energy like I am. And Jesus is the greatest mediator, greater than Moses. He doesn't need a break like we do. He doesn't need rest like we do. He doesn't need to pass off his responsibilities and delegate to somebody else. He's always attentive all the time to every person, everywhere. You know, while you were sleeping last night, guess what God was doing? He was up all night again, taking care of everyone, holding the very universe in his hand and listening to every prayer, hearing every dispute and every request. And guess what? Tonight when you go to sleep, Jesus isn't going to sleep again. He's going to stay up all night and continue to look after your world and everyone else's. He is the mediator that Moses could never be. And he invites you into a life of rest, enjoying him, being fully satisfied in him, a gospel rest that understands I cannot do enough things to earn the favor of God, to please him. Like, I don't have to prove myself. Please hear me. I'm still learning this. I don't have to prove myself to God or to my own standards or to anybody else. Jesus says, are you tired, worn out, burned out? Come to me. I'll teach you the unforced rhythms of grace, where you don't have to go on performing and striving and trying to do all the right things and get into the right college and get the right job and marry the right person and have the right kids and do everything right in order for your future to be seen as successful. Jesus says you are a child of God, and that is success enough. You are sealed with Christ. Rest.